The next day of our trip, and after a long day of crunching miles the day before and our first night's sleep acclimatising to life in a tent, it was time to head east out of Belgium, through Luxembourg and into Germany's Black Forest. We would be making our way to Baden Baden on Route 500, a route number that seems to be synonymous with iconic driving roads. The flat plains of Belgium eventually turned into long winding roads that take you through beautiful countryside and eventually up into the expansive Black Forest. There were, as usual, several stops along the way to take in the magnificent scenery surrounding us, and obviously to chat about the remarkable condition of the roads. It must have been nearly 2 days since we'd encountered a pothole, remarkable by anyone's standards. We even managed to take a quick run through Luxembourg, although admittedly that doesn't really take very long. Because we decided to make Baden Baden one of our destination stops, there was no real rush to get there, so the 100 or so miles that we had to cover from our previous night's stop didn't have to be tackled with any real aggression. We were free to soak up the sun, the scenery, and enjoy the ride. By mid-afternoon, we'd found a spot to camp a couple miles outside of Baden Baden and set up our tents on the side of a valley in the blistering sunshine. It had been an easy day's riding and it was time to relax for the afternoon with a few beers before we set off to a local restaurant for a leisurely dinner before it was back to the tents for the night. In the morning, Mike and I would head off into Baden Baden to relax at one of the city's thermal spas, floating around in the outdoor pool with a drink, and then afterwards, a delicious lunch in the shade of a terrace restaurant in the city centre. James, for some reason, didn't find this a productive or enjoyable use of his time, so he took himself off for the day to discover more of the challengingly winding roads that the Black Forest has to offer, especially as we were now in a more mountainous area filled with tighter bends than we'd encountered so far and many a switchback. Once Mike and I had finished our leisurely lunch, it was time for a quick walk around the town before it was back to the campsite to pack up and hit Route 500. The route certainly didn't disappoint with its mix of sharp and long sweeping bends that kept us occupied as we made our way towards Bregenz on the banks of Lake Constance. Unfortunately, we didn't quite make it as far as that, as the weather closed in on us and the rain came down hard. Despite having invested in a waterproof jacket and trouser set to go over my bike clothes, the water was quick to let me know it'd broken through my defences and was currently pooling in places you don't want it pooling. After several hours of being battered by the rain and sitting in a cold puddle of rainwater, it was time to call it a day and start searching for somewhere to stay. Being a fair weather camper, I was not prepared to set up tent in such miserable weather to spend the night amongst wet clothes. Tonight was going to be a hotel night, so that us and our clothes could dry off and we could start fresh the next morning. A quick bit of searching and we found ourselves at Humboldt House in Achberg. It was a bit of an odd place, a bit like a hippie retreat, but it was warm and dry as the heavens continued to unload on us. Once we were settled inside, everything was hung up to dry wherever we could find a heat source, turning our bedrooms into some of the worst organised dry cleaners you've ever seen. After a hot shower with some dry clothes on, it was off to the bar for dinner, drinks and a few games of cards. The next morning didn't really bring us much rest from the wet weather. The entire day was overcast and dreary as we wrapped up in our waterproofs. But, just like the day before, it didn't take long for the dam to break and the water to come flooding back in again. One day, I'm going to learn not to trust everything the manufacturer tells you. Despite the rain, our target for today was Neuschwanstein Castle, or the German Disney Castle as it's known to the English-speaking world. A 19th century palace built on the top of a hill like something out of Beauty and the Beast. Ideally, we would have marvelled at it on a glorious day as it glimmered in the sun. Today though, we had to look at it through the breaks in the fog. Despite this, it was no less impressive as it was towered out of the mist like something magical above the valley below. With our cultural batteries filled to the brim, we saddled up and headed for the border into Austria, where we stumbled upon a campsite that had quite possibly the best showering facilities I've ever enjoyed at a campsite. Not only that, but the view was absolutely gorgeous as we pitched up our tents on the side of the hill overlooking the stunning clear blue waters of Lake Plancy. Not only were the showering facilities top notch, the campsite had an amazing on-site restaurant which was hard to resist. So we sat down for the night and warmed up with pizzas and beers whilst we decided on the route for the next day. Join us in the next episode where we make our way across Austria to tackle the mighty Grossglockner Pass.